So it's thinking about what you're trying to achieve, and having the technique right when you step in immediately allows you to be like, cool, I have this part down, and be like, that's awesome. Technically, that part's proficient. Give me a little bit more of like a bend. Give me some hair on the end of that phrasing. And then you can start getting into the stuff that really makes the sounds, the gear, and the production overall, and the song like sing and feel extra emotive. So yeah, I mean, technique is a huge part of setting the foundation for that. Huh. What's this red button do?
You are now entering a restricted area. You may experience a phenomenon known as true sight. What's wrong?
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're on the record process here. Got Adam, Tom, myself,
Hello.
And we are going to pick up right where we left off, and we are finally, this far into the process, we're ready to hit record, y'all.
It took us a while to get here, but boy, was it a fun journey.
That was the record process. We're done. Bye.
That was it. We're done. You hit record and you just walk away, honestly. Yeah. It's like Ronco, set it and forget it. And honestly, if you're too young to understand that reference, then how are you lilistening to this podcast?
I'm on this podcast.
Me either.
Honestly, go look up Ron Popeil's Ronco, famous infomercial. I don't know, honestly. As I say this, I feel like he's probably got some weird, there's probably some weird, like, political leanings that I'm not at all aligned with. But he did make a mean rotisserie chicken appliance for your home and was phenomenally known for setting it and forgetting it was his tagline. We're not going to.
That's not what we do here on the record.
That is, in fact, the antithesis
process
of what we do here on the record process. But we have...
Casey will throw that in the show notes.
I will definitely throw that in the show notes after doing a little bit more extensive research about his social and political leanings, because I am not sure about this character anymore. I was also young when this was all over television.
That was 2001.
Right. There you go. 2 years after Sugar Ray's floored... No, 4 years after Sugar Ray's floored. Honestly, this is...
Which is a good metric to how to, like, map your entire life, is when Sugar Ray's
before SR and after SR.
Yeah. None of this ADBC bullshit.
No. Get real with it. But anyway, all of that aside, we do not set it and forget it. When we've led to the moment where we do press that big red button, it's all very well thought out, and what happens after that is what we're going to talk about today. How to make sure that when you press that red button, what you get is something you like, and how to go about that. And there's a couple different ways. We're going to break down different approaches, give you some techniques, how to capture the right feel, and ultimately how to get a good take. Right? How to get the take, if you will, and what that even maybe means, right? So the first part of all of this, in terms of doing, getting into the weeds and getting the takes rolling and rolling on tape, whether it's analog, digital, or, whatever format you're choosing, right? Is talking about performance and the technique you're looking to get from a session musician. So, Adam, as our resident shredder here and session musician extraordinaire, I would love you to take us away by starting us off and talking a little bit about technique.
This is going to be a fun one. I mean, being a session musician is like... It's been a dream of mine for a long time. I love playing all different types of music. I love to play all different genres, and being a session musician to me means a whole lot. So I take a lot of pride in like the things that we're about to talk about today. But as a session musician, your job is to show up and like really deliver at every point in time, because like a lot of times, there have certainly been sessions where I've been really close with the artist and I've been really close with the producer, and like we have a shorthand. We know exactly what we're looking for and that kind of thing. But there's also been sessions where I've walked in and I don't know the person that I'm recording for. I've never met them, and like I have to interpret what it is that they want as a session musician. To give them the art that's been in their head for so long, So for me, one of the most important things is just like getting my technique like dialed. I think as a session musician, it's really important to have your technique really on lock, because there's a certain amount of timbre that you can get out of an instrument from, like let's say a lot of the session work that I've done is on bass guitar. That's the instrument that I was trained on. It's certainly the one that I'm the best at. And even on bass, I think people underestimate how much minute changes on an instrument can change what it's going to sound like when it actually comes to the record. So not only from like the guitar choice that you're going with, or the amp choice, or the pedals and all that kind of stuff, but physically how your body interacts with the instrument, from like where I'm picking on the bass itself to what strings I'm using to like if I'm going with a pick or if I'm going with a finger style thing, and having all of this kind of as a backlog as a session musician to know how to get that emotional reaction for the artist to get that exact sound that they're looking for. And a lot of this we talked about on our last episode, of knowing your sounds and knowing your capabilities before you even walk into the session, just knowing kind of like the vibe that you're walking into, bringing the right tools for the job, and then bringing the right techniques to use on those tools. Because it's not just a simple matter of, plucking a string. It's about plucking a string in a certain way to make sure that the sound is good, the vibe is good, the meter's good. And I think just knowing how to get those appropriate sounds from your physical instrument and your performance is so crucial. And getting to study under the great Nat Reeves up at the Hart School of Music, he was really really important in my development as a player, because I went into college as one of these bass players. I was a lead bass player, which was a weird thing. Coming out of high school, I was playing as fast as I could, as high as I could, and I thought I was hot shit. And then I'd walk into his room, and like he'd hear me play all this stuff, and then ultimately he'd play like two whole notes that would make me weep. Because they were just played with such purpose, and they were played with such a beautiful sound. And he was really big on like, as an upright player, you got to be able to develop your sound and your timbre by like the way you pluck the strings. So stop working on all this like crazy scales, and like I don't care if you can play all of Ornithology, like Charlie Parker's solo from Ornithology on bass. Like I care that your notes sound good every single time. So having your technique out of the gate is so critical to making sure that once it hits that recording, everything feels really nice. Everything like sits the way it should. And, even Tom has commented before on bass playing, where like when you have a good bass player, you like get an extra octave of frequencies out of the low end that like if your technique is poor, you may not have. Or I mean, Casey, you and I, how many picks have we gone through before we've settled on the appropriate sound for an acoustic guitar or even electric guitar, and like picking the place where you're gonna where you're gonna strum, and then on top of that, staying consistent with all of it. Because if your technique is all out of whack, or it's really loose, or it's really if it's inconsistent, you're not going to ultimately deliver in that session. So that's kind of where like technique really comes into play, as far as like getting the sound.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of this in terms of the physical approach. So obviously drums and percussion are extremely physical in the motion of it, in the energy and in the force behind it, and also, the dynamics in a lot of ways. But yeah, like guitar and bass and a lot of stringed instruments especially, and I think vocals in their own right in terms of being a vocalist, there's even more to talk about in terms of why good technique is important there. But as a guitar player, that's so much of spending the time in the studio. Part of it is dialing in, the sounds, playing with knobs. That's all great. Everybody thinks that that's kind of the tone quest. But I think sometimes even more, the majority of the time is actually spent, by me sitting there listening, whether it's with, cans on or getting really close and saying, okay, play the riff, and being like, I do this thing. Any band that's kind of worked with me knows that it's my physical knob where I say north or south, and it's where I want their picking hand in relation to the bridge versus the neck. And I find that sweet spot, and every guitar is different. Every set of pickups is kind of different. It depends what kind of strings, what gauge you're using, right? But it depends the angle of the pick, how much scrape you want versus how, how you're trying to, what the part is trying to do in the mix. And that is this, really incredible, magical thing that happens between the notes in a lot of ways. And it doesn't always get articulated in terms of, notation, right? If you sit down and to read a chart, there's a lot of dynamic markings, a lot of accent markings, but it's this timbre quality that really makes things either stand out or sit in an extra special place in the mix that makes it feel like a record and not just this is the technical capture of these notes played in this rhythm, at this time. That I think it, is the artistry of it, but is the detail that is so important when it comes to making something that feels real. I think it was all of us I know spent so many years as kids and in some ways still do it, tracking stuff and trying to get it to quote unquote sound like a record, right? And I think this is one of those things where, it boils down to the being all under the scope of technique, but working with someone that knows the different nuances of, hey, instead of me boosting the top end on something, or trying to cut some mids or notch something out, I'll kind of have you try, if you're a guitar player, move where your hand is, or I'll move where the mic is, or one of these things. But a lot of it tends to be with the dynamic of the player and the touch that they have. And every player is different, which is also why, talking back to setup and capture, Tom, this is kind of where we left off with that. If you have a drummer that hits really hard, you don't want to all of a sudden tell them, hey, everything about your style, do it differently. Because you're going to get not a good take out of that if all of a sudden all they're thinking about is, hey, everything I intuitively want to do, he said I shouldn't do, right? Yeah. You want to make sure that the setup allows them to bring out the things that they are really good at that are going to be unique about it. And that's the same way for this, where only to a certain degree, if I'm searching around for days and days and I'm just like, nope, move it differently. And if after a little bit, the player winds up in some weird, crazy twister of a position, I'm like, stop. And I'm like, that means I don't have the sound. I need to dial something in different. Maybe we need to change guitars, change amps, change mics. But it all starts with knowing what's the touch, how much do we need to get out of it. And 9 times out of 10, it's usually just a simple note or a simple coach and knowing to listen for. It's like, it sounds a little dull. Where are you picking? You slid down. Go an inch north again. I could tell from that last take that you changed where you're at. Yeah. So sometimes even on a guitar, and I'll do this, we talked about a tracking acoustic, and I'm sure, any acoustic instrument, whether it's upright bass, strings, where you are decidedly in control of the directionality and proximity to a microphone, and that you moving away or closer to it can change. And especially if you're overdubbing or punching things in, I will very often, especially if it's acoustic, where you will sit for days and be like, wait, hold it, stop, I got it. It's perfect. I love the overtones. It's balanced, everything about it. I'll tape out where my feet are on the floor and where that chair is. And sometimes it's the same thing. I'll tape out where my picking hand is so that every time we're like, cool, we're getting ready, we're jumping back in, I'll make sure my pick is exactly where it had been for this song and for this part, so that I know if I punch it, all factors will be the same and it will be almost as close to the articulation and timbre of the rest of the track. And I think that's also in getting better results. Sometimes you can sit at home and just demo some stuff and you'll be like, I don't know, it's just I can't mix it. It's because all your punch points are sliding all over the place with different timbres, different EQ sounds, different amounts of ambience. And that's why you feel like you're fighting it, because every time you get it, the section switches to a different take and it just something feels a little off, right? So
Yeah.
that's part of getting the right take as a whole, is making sure that that technique is there. And when you have it, you can control the factors that keep you comfortable, but also give the artist and what they are in control of the ability to maintain that for a session.
Yeah.